Dr. Chaffee back on, Mr. Shields, co-host, and I myself, Chris White. That's a different intro. I've never done that. Great to have you back. How you been?
Thanks, man. No, good, man. Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me back on.
So you've been eating plenty of meat. You got more swole, hey?
Yeah, always eating meat. Yeah.
That's it. Bench pressing it too. Looks like it. You've been training hard?
No, not really. You just sort of keep it. Like when you're just eating this way, you just you can build up muscle very quickly, and it's very, very slow to come down. And I sort of never lose my leanness. Sort of always at similar body fat percentage. I will get a bit leaner if I'm working out a lot, but not all that much. It's still stay pretty lean all around. And so whenever, even when I was eating like vegetables and things like that, still like ketogenic, not doing much of carbs, 2 weeks, if I wasn't in the gym for 2 weeks, I would start seeing that my physique was starting to change. I'd be a bit less, muscular, a bit more fluffy and fatty,
fluffy,
and so it was within a couple of weeks, you just be like, your body just starts degrading. Whereas now it just never happens. I never get in less shape than I am now. And so when I'm working out regularly, I'll put on muscle very easily. I'll feel very good. I like that just from, I feel better when I work out and feel stronger, and my bodies and joints feel better. But when I don't have time to work out, it's very, very slow to lose any of it, and it doesn't go past a certain point. This is basically as bad as it gets for me.
Really, that's a good result.
I've got a full confession to make. I just did a leg of ultra marathon on the weekend.
Yeah, nice.
And performed okay. I had a bit of an injured calf going into it, but that night I ate an entire pizza to myself.
Yeah,
and I kid you not, I'm the sorest I've ever been. I know because it's fresh in my memory, but my quads, oh my goodness. I could maybe blame it on a slightly different running gait because my calf or something, but God.
Compared to last year, because for those that are new listeners and might not have heard the previous podcast we have done with you, it was nearly a year ago, eh?
It was just April last year. Yeah, and I was strict carnivore for how long? I reckon
from that, or a little bit prior to the podcast, and then you were well and truly in your groove in that run.
Yeah. So I did a run after about 4 weeks carnivore, and stats wise on my watch, heart rate, performance was the best I've ever done. Nice. Undoubtedly, like by a long shot.
Yeah. And recovery and everything.
Everything, yeah. And then I slowly fell off the wagon. I reckon I was about 6 months, like pure. I was I had the little keto strips, and I was testing and staying in ketosis. And then, do you know what it was? I had a gateway drug, an avocado.
Bloody avocados.
Because one day I forget why. I think I was almost curious, like, I'll test how this avocado goes. And it didn't have any negative effect on me. And then before you know it, an avocado leads to like a white potato, and then
carrot.
I don't do carrots, but yeah.
Before you know it, doing meth under a bridge.
Side of broccoli.
Yeah, that's it.
How strict are you at the moment?
I've never deviated. I've never had a single cheat day, single cheat meal at any point.
Last piece of birthday cake, or for instance?
No idea. I mean,
we're talking years.
Yeah, I mean, I've been full on again for the last sort of 6.5, 7 years. In my early 20s, it was 5 years, and then I sort of slipped off because I didn't realize what I was doing or how significant it was. I just knew that plants were toxic, so I was just not eating them. But then everyone just went, "Oh, you have to have some," and it just sort of wears on you. And now that I know just how bad they are for me, just how good I feel, just the difference in those first 5 years that I just was playing professional rugby, never felt better in my entire life. I was always trying to get like, how did I feel when I was 25 and a half? I did not feel as good as I did at 20, 25 and a quarter. And it was like, what the hell is the difference? What is going on? And that's exactly when I started incorporating in, I was living in England, I was playing rugby there, and there was chicken that had some crumbs on it. And I was just like, well, it's easier, it's convenient. I could just grab a couple packs of these things, eat them for, a few days a week. And that was it. That was enough to take the edge off of my performance and my health. And I was just like, why don't I feel as just superhuman amazing as I normally do? I'm not pushing myself. I'm not working as hard. Like, am I just old now? I'm just 25. It's just like over the hill. I'm just dying now. But it was like 25 and a half, I was old and dying. 25 and a quarter, I was a superhuman. What the hell is the difference there? And I didn't figure it out. I didn't realize it was just that little bit incorporating something back in that was enough to take the shine off. And then once I started letting one thing in, it was just, oh, maybe that's not, well, maybe dose makes the poison. Maybe it's not that big a deal, and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then you're back eating a very clean diet. I never ate a processed food diet ever, but I would still cook. I'd still make my own meals, but I was incorporating in some, but mostly meat and vegetables, almost exclusively. Every now and then, some toast or something like that, or something. But that made a huge difference. So now that I know, I go back to that and I'm like, okay, so that's what I was doing. Figured it out finally. And now I was 38 when I came back to this. I'm 44 now. And at 38, within 2 weeks of just getting rid of and I was only eating vegetables and meat, lean meat, not that much of it, and eating a lot of vegetables. Felt like garbage. And then I just cut out the vegetables, started eating a lot more fatty meat, probably quintupled my caloric intake. I felt like a superhuman. I mean, within 2 weeks, I felt like I was 22 again. And I lost 10 kilos in 10 days. And I was like, right, going back to play some rugby. And I went at 38, I started playing professional rugby again. Felt like a superhero. I felt better at 38, fat and out of shape, but 2 weeks on carnivore than when I was 28 playing professional rugby, training for 6 hours a day.
Yeah. I know a lot of the people listening probably, I guess it's something you have to try, because I listened to that, and if I hadn't done it myself, I probably wouldn't think I can't just do 2 weeks and feel that good. But it is crazy how much different you do feel. But something, I don't know if I think we probably discussed it after having you on, because you don't do any coffee either, hey?
No, that's the thing, because I see that contrast, because I know objectively what's in these things, what these toxins that are in there, why we're not supposed to eat it, that I feel so much better. I have zero interest in eating any of this stuff.
Yeah, because coffee for me, I couldn't kick it. And then
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, back on carnivore with coffee, that's when I felt like my superhumanist.
Yeah, both the double dose. Yeah. I couldn't imagine life without coffee. Which is, you probably hate hearing that. But I love coffee.
But a lot of people are in that situation. And if you're just eating meat and you're drinking coffee as well, but you've gotten rid of all the rest of it, you're doing better than 99%, 99.99999% of people out there. When you consider the fact that the entire subcontinent of India with 1.2 billion people, 30% of them have diagnosed diabetes. That's 400 million people that eat a plant-based diet and have diabetes. You're doing better than almost everybody on earth, if you're just cutting out just everything except coffee and meat.
I remember something that, I don't know your exact quote, but you basically said the last 5% though is what makes all the difference. And so I'd say the last year on average, I'd be 90% carnivore, and I'd have occasional chips with my steak, or what's another carb? I have introduced a little bit of chopped up plum with my yogurt, just little bits of sugar. And then I don't know why I do it, introduce it, because I know that when you are so pure, you just feel like on that different level. But I don't know whether it's a
comfort thing or
maybe it's I don't even know.
Sugar is also very addictive.
Yeah, the sugar monster's real high.
Yeah. And so, some people say, well, sugar, fructose gives a dopamine hit to the reward centers of your brain. And some people say, well, that doesn't mean it's addictive. I heard one guy say that, well, hugs give you dopamine hit as well. Does that mean hugs are addictive? Well, some people would say yes. They feel much better when they get hugs and they want more of them. Girls with daddy issues, for instance, they might be very addicted to those sorts of things. But the thing is, though, is that hugs aren't going to actually kill those areas of your brain from overstimulation, which is actually what fructose does. So they've done studies with MRIs in humans where they've checked just normal people that don't have sugar or drug addictions or anything like that, gave them a dose of amphetamines, some sort of medication, Vyvanse, those sorts of things. It will give this dopamine hit and give that big reward hit. And you look on MRI and they can see that the areas of the brain just light up like a Christmas tree. Then you give that same dose to a meth addict and it's barely twinkles, right? Because the areas of the brain is dead, because they have an overstimulation from just constant turning on of this dopamine. When neurons are on, when they're firing, they actually get damaged and they have to turn off to be able to heal and repair themselves. And so dopamine is an excitatory molecule. And so as you keep flooding your system with dopamine, it will it will continually excite those neurons. They'll keep turning them on. That's why it drops down the receptors. So you need more to get the same effect. That's why people increase the amount of meth and cocaine that they need to use, because they get a tolerance for it. That's what their brain's doing. They're dampening down the receptors. And then eventually they just keep flooding this, those cells start to die. And so you see that in those meth addicts. You give them a dose of amphetamines and it just barely twinkles. But then they give that same dose of amphetamines to sugar addicts who are metabolically sick, same barely twinkle. So this killed the same areas of the brain as meth to the same extent as meth. So hugs aren't going to do that. Fructose specifically. Yeah. And so it's going to be in all sort of sugar, table sugar, fruit sugar, honey, high fructose corn syrup, processed sugar, unprocessed sugar. It's all the same stuff. And so people say, well, this natural sugar comes from plants. All sugar comes from plants. It's either comes from corn, beetroots, sugarcane, or fruit, right? So that's sugar. Sugar is sugar is sugar. It's like saying, well, this is natural arsenic. And we have natural cyanide in almonds and cassava, but it's still cyanide and it can still kill you because it's cyanide. And that's the whole point. In fact, cyanide is supposed to kill you. That's what the plant's trying to do, is defend itself. But sugar is not trying to kill you, but it is addictive, and it can be addictive. I mean, just like cocaine, that's natural. That comes from the coca leaf, and heroin that comes from poppy seed, poppy and opiates, right? Yep. So they're all plants. And so the idea that this is natural and therefore good for you is wrong. Also, hugs don't actually give you this massive dopamine burst and flood you with dopamine. They actually give a lot of serotonin, which is actually a dampening molecule. Actually slows down the processes and actually preserves and protects your brain as well. So hugs, while some people may be addicted to these sorts of things or enjoy them, they're not addictive in the same way. It's all relative, right?
Has anyone died from a hug? Have you researched that?
Not that I know of.
Depends who hugs you.
Not from the dopamine exchange anyway. Right?
Jeffrey Epstein died from hugging too.
Exactly.
Came back to get him. It's crazy though. I've definitely got an addictive personality, I reckon. Mm-hmm. And it kind of runs in my family, definitely, because I've had family members that have had substance abuse and stuff. But I reckon definitely love coffee, but I stopped sugar, like fully went clean in November and December, or late October to Christmas time. And I could not believe how good I felt by cutting sugar out. Like any temptations, I went really clean. And I remember it took the week. I did no alcohol, no sugar, and I found the sugar was harder to quit than the alcohol, obviously. But I remember having my first piece of chocolate just after Christmas or during that festive break. I remember Whitey saying to me in the lead up, he's like, that sugar monster, why don't you have a little bit? Because I fully stopped craving it and I was in such a good place. And I did have one little taste and then it got me off the rails again. Hey, like, and it was crazy how like every day then after that, I was like, oh, I'll have a little bit of a fun sized chocolate or something. But then it creeps back in.
Yeah.
Could you
I was always ashamed of myself.
Could you rank these in worse for my body out of a plum, an avocado, a white potato, and coconut water? Because these are my little vices.
White potato first and foremost.
White potato. Yeah. So when I finished the run, I was super depleted, felt I was about to pass out. And at the ultra station, they have this little array of treats. There's like water, little jelly snakes. They had carrot cakes, cookies. You should have seen me. I was like, because I felt so low and like I was about to pass out. I was eating oatmeal cookies, grabbed a Lamington. I went past the caramel slice. I thought I did good there. But I grabbed a bag of little white potatoes. And as I'm eating them, they actually felt good. But yeah, so white potato is the worst out of them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's going to give you a bigger glucose spike, and you're going to give a bigger insulin hit as well. You know, I mean, it depends on the plum. I mean, plums can be very sweet. They do have fiber in them, which actually mitigates the absorption. People don't realize this, but fiber is an anti-nutrient. It actually blocks out the absorption of many nutrients. It actually stops you from absorbing things. And people say, oh, that's a good thing. You'll absorb less of the stuff that you eat. Oh, that's great, because we don't want to absorb all these things. Why'd you eat it? Right? We eat things in order to gain nutrients and so we can absorb them. And so, yeah, if you're eating high octane garbage, then yeah, sure. You know, reducing the amount that you absorb is probably a good idea, but you're still absorbing some. And, you know, probably just a better idea just not to eat it at all. But plum does have some fiber They can be very, very sweet. So they can have a lot of
these
sugar.
These are sweet.
Sweet plums.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's not great. It also depends on how much you're eating of them. If you're having a plum every now
Just
and then.
one every week, maybe.
Yeah. As opposed to potatoes every day, that's going to be different. If you're eating just bags of plums, then yeah, the plums are going to be worse. Also remember that fruit, if it's ripened on the tree or the vine, is going to have a lower toxic load. So fruit still has toxins. It's just that the sweet fruits, the ones with fructose, it's sort of a double-edged sword, fructose, because we recognize that as sweet, that sweetness as something safe, and so it's called an evolutionary trap. So we recognize that as safe. So our hindbrain is saying like, "Ooh, that's safe. We can eat that, right? That's not going to kill us right now. We can get energy from that. It won't kill us. It's a plant that's safe to eat." Because we don't know of plants that contain fructose that are acutely poisonous to us that will kill us that day if we eat it. That doesn't mean they don't have toxins. Grapes and avocados will both kill cats and dogs, right? They don't kill us, but how do they kill a cat and dog? Because there are toxins in them.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, but it's just that they're less toxic to us, right? So we have more of a defense towards them. But like wine has tannins, right? They always like, red wine has a lot of tannins and all that sort of stuff. And where does that come from? It comes from the grape, right? So they have these tannins which will bind to proteins, denature them. They're not as useful. We can't absorb them and get as much nutrients out of them. And they do other sorts of things in your body. There's a wide variety of different tannins. They can do a lot of different things, but they're toxins, right? Yeah. And so they're just not going to kill you that day. But so we recognize, okay, that's something safe. So we recognize that as sweet. And okay. But we would never come across that amount of sugar in the wild. It would be a very small amount. Generally, fruit were very tart. They didn't have much meat to them. They're mostly fiber and seed. And so we've just cultivated these and bred these things over the century and the millennia to make them sweet as hell, much bigger than they were before, with a much higher fructose content. And then, you had to fight a swarm of bees. Like you die, doing that before they figured out how to smoke them out. You could not get access to the honey. And if you did, you figure that out. People didn't come across honeybees all that often necessarily. And you certainly wouldn't be finding refined sugars and sugary drinks and dumping sugar in absolutely everything. So it's called an evolutionary trap. So there's something in our brain that says, "Ooh, that's safe," and we get the go signal. And especially when you combine that with sugar, with fat and salt, you get a big go signal. And so that's why everything's sugary fats with salt in it, right? And so you get this big go signal, and you don't know how to stop, and you eat, right? And so that's the thing. So they had these things with hummingbirds. Another example of this: hummingbirds, they're looking for little flowers to get nectar from, and they had these little connectors on these electric fences out in farms in the Midwest in America, and they had these little red plastic connectors, and it was just the right shape and the right color that it looked like the flower this little hummingbird normally went for, and it just went in, stuck its face in there, and then just hit the electric fence, dropped dead. And so just like thousands of these things were just dropping dead because they were thinking these things were flowers. So that's an evolutionary trap. Their brain is telling them that's where my food is, that's where I got to go, and they're dying. And then they had, they changed the color of it, even though it was the same shape, it was a different color, solved the problem. So this is our evolutionary trap. And so because we have such access to the sugar we would never have in the wild, we just don't understand that this go signal is really bad. You can have a go signal from meat, high fat meat. It tastes good. Bacon is amazing. Like I know Jewish people who ate bacon because it's like pigs, dirty creature. You're not supposed to eat it, but bacon's good. And
yeah.
Like I've had friends of mine say that, who are Jewish, and it is good. It's delicious. It's salty fat. It's amazing, right? So you're getting those go signals, but that eventually doesn't taste good anymore. You get sort of negative feedback. So the more bacon you have, the more meat you have, the less good it tastes, until finally it doesn't taste good anymore. And you self-limit, you self-regulate the amount that you're bringing in. Whereas things like sugar, that regulation goes off. You're just getting this go signal the whole time. And it doesn't really dampen. Also, fructose, sugar in general, will raise blood sugar. That raises insulin. That does a lot of horrible things in your body, which are very important because people think it's like, well, your blood sugar goes up And then insulin goes up, and that just drives energy into cells. That's a normal reaction. That's a normal process. It's a normal process down here at normal physiological levels. But when you start spiking up your blood sugar and spiking up your insulin, that is completely out of balance, because if it was just about insulin driving energy into cells, that would be one thing. But it's not. Insulin affects over 100 different metabolic processes in your body. And so if your insulin's around a 5, which is a nice place for insulin to be, then it's affecting everything at a 5, right? But then you eat some pasta, or you have that super sweet plum or bag of white potatoes, and it jumps up to 35.
Yeah.
You're affecting everything at a 35. I had a patient that came in to my office a few months ago. His fasting insulin, so without eating for 24 hours, was 72, right? It should be at a 5. It was 72, right? And that's fasting, right? So if he ate something, then that was going to jump up even higher than that. So he was obviously going to have a lot of metabolic issues with that, because again, this affects over 100 different things.
Was he diabetic or something?
Yes, he was very much diabetic and had other metabolic issues. But I put him on a carnivore diet. 2 months later, actually 6 weeks later, his fasting insulin was down to 35 from 72. I mean, it makes a massive, massive difference immediately. Nothing else does that. No endocrinologist on this planet doing the traditional medicine up until right now, when people are actually starting to cop onto this, has ever reversed anyone with diabetes ever, right? And certainly not with the traditional methods of medication, because that just treats the symptoms. It doesn't treat the underlying disease.
Yeah.
And so this is treating the underlying disease. You're getting rid of the carbohydrates, and the insulin just comes right down. The reason the insulin goes up like that is because high blood sugar is toxic to the body. This is what kills diabetics. No one's arguing that. I've never heard anyone argue that. So the people that say, well, your blood sugar goes up and insulin goes up correspondingly, that just drives energy in. I was taught that exact phrase was taught to me in biochemistry 24 years ago.
Yep.
Right. But it ignores all the other functions that insulin has in the body. It ignores the fact that our primary metabolic state is one without carbohydrates, and that almost every animal on Earth does, except honeybees and hummingbirds, rely on fat and protein, not carbohydrates. Carnivores, because they eat animals that are made out of fat and protein, not carbohydrates. So they're all in that ketogenic state. So that's not a stress state. That's not a famine state. That's not a, oh my goodness, we can only do this a short-term state. Like lions don't need, I better carb load. This being ketosis too long is just horrible. But herbivores as well, because while they eat fibrous plants, and the vast majority of herbivores are eating fibrous plants, fiber is made out of glucose, but no animal can actually break down fiber into glucose. There's no have cellulase. They're on cellulose. The cellulase breaks down those bonds. No animal, not even termites, make cellulase. It's the microorganisms in their gut that make cellulase, and they eat the fiber. And then as a byproduct, they produce saturated fat and protein. And so they eat the fiber, but what they absorb is fat and protein. So cows and horses and gorillas, they're all getting fat and protein, and they're all in a ketogenic state. And so that ignores all that. And so when people say, well, your blood sugar is supposed to go up and then your insulin goes up and that drives that down, that's only because when we've been observing and studying biochemistry, that's what people were doing. We're eating carbohydrate-filled meals. So that was normal for the time, but that's actually not normal for humanity and our species, and it can cause a lot of problems. High blood sugar kills you. High blood sugar kills diabetics. That high blood sugar, those glucose molecules, little rings, they physically fuse to other molecules called glycation, and you can get advanced glycation end products, AGEs, and you build these things up, you're getting more and more damage in your body. And so your body is desperately trying to protect you by raising your insulin. It's like when you have a fire at your house, the fire department comes and they're hosing it down with water, and you get all this water damage. Oh, I don't want to get this water damage. And I'm like, you want your house to burn down? Right. So you take the water damage because you don't want the fire damage. You don't want it all to be destroyed. Right. But then you start a fire the next day, and more water damage, and the next day, 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 and the next day. And pretty soon your house is screwed. Right. Because you got a lot of water damage. You got a lot of fire damage. And you're trying to repair things and do these sorts of things, but the fires keep coming. That's what we're doing every day with high, jacking up your blood sugar. So you have about 4 grams of glucose in your entire bloodstream at any given time. That's a level teaspoon of glucose.
Yep.
Right. And that is responsible to run all the physiological processes of your body and brain. Just those 4 grams, 1 extra gram is a toxic dose of glucose in your body. 1 extra gram, you get up to 5 grams, you start overwhelming your system with glycation, and you actually can die. This is where you're losing toes and feet and legs. They get kidney failure, they go blind, they get heart disease, and they die, right? The diabetics do, right? And so that's 1 extra gram prolonged of glucose. And so of course you need your insulin to go up. That's damage control hazmat, but you're taking water damage in at the same time because you're affecting 100 other different processes, and that really screws up your body.
So the fireman with the water, is the water the insulin?
Yeah.
Got it. Yes.
Yeah.
So when that old mate comes into your office and you see his numbers at 72 or whatever it is fasting, what plan do you put in place? Like for people that aren't aware, like, and we know you're a carnivore specialist, what are you giving him? What sort of plan? Are you going sitting down and going, mate, this is your diet? Like obviously you've got that back information on him, but you're like, this is what you need to start doing to get this stuff down. And what's he eating on day one? Once he leaves your office, what do you got him on?
Yeah, I mean, just go. You eat whatever meat that tastes good to you, makes you feel the best, you can afford and have access to. And eggs are included in that. Eggs are honorary meat. They're all the nutrients and everything, building blocks of building meat, because that turns into an animal, right? And so that has all the nutrients that you need to make an animal. And this is why I say, oh, there's all this cholesterol in eggs. Oh, this horrible cholesterol. And it's just like, well, that's going to make a baby chicken. Is that just full of heart disease and cancer and all that sort of stuff? And why would it cause a bunch of cancer in you? I mean, it doesn't really fit, right? I mean, maybe. But I mean, you can't just say that. You can't just say, oh, there's all this cholesterol. Look at how horrible it is. It's not horrible for the chicken or any other animal on earth, right? Because like every other animal on earth survives on saturated fat, carnivores and herbivores, as we just discussed. So whatever meat that they want, that they feel the best on.
So we're talking sausages, they can have bacon, they can have.
So those sorts of things are going to have a whole bunch of additives.
Yep. So avoid that.
Yeah, if you can. Well, I mean, look at the ingredients, right? So if a sausage is like 75% pork, and it's just like, okay, well, what's the other 25%, right? So if you go to a butcher, you make your own, and it's just meat and maybe some salt, and you put in some, seasonings or something like that. Okay, that's fair enough. But if it has a bunch of like starch and flour and stuff like that, no, I wouldn't eat that sort of stuff. But whole meats is going to be best. Bacon depends on the bacon. If they put in a lot of sugar, it's like maple bacon, that sort of thing, I would definitely avoid that. There are sugar-free cures that they have for bacon. That's fine. It really just matters what they do to meat. The processed meat isn't the problem. It's what's processed with that could be the problem. But ground beef is processed. You've done a process to it. Anytime you don't have just a dead cow on the road, that's a process because someone's chopped it up and done something to it. But it's not, so it's not the meat that's the problem. It's something they've added to it: the spices, the seasonings, the sugars, the chemicals and preservatives, and all that sort of nonsense. But you try to eat clean. You try to eat whole meats. Try to eat whole foods always. Everyone should be doing that anyway, whether omnivore, herbivore, vegetarian. But they, just tell them just eat whatever meat you want, eggs that you want. Avoid those sorts of things. I think it's as important what not to eat as what to eat. So I tell them, well, at least for me, I say this is what I think is the best. This is what I do. So, no plants or mushrooms, right? Nothing, no sugar or any sweeteners, and nothing artificial. And that will go for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. If people want to use a bit of seasonings and spices, then that helps them get their head around it. I don't know if I could just do that. Fine. Don't throw away the good for the perfect, right? I mean, just getting rid of almost everything besides some, pepper on your meat is, whatever. You're still making massive improvements. For my patients in the clinic, it's actually a bit easier to make that case that they should be doing this because I'm looking at their bloods, because they're coming in, they're telling me their health issues, and we're going through them in fine detail about what's going on, what's affecting them, what their goals and hopes are, with this treatment process. That, they're saying like, hey, I have these issues, I have these problems, and I'm on these medications, but they're just taking care of the symptoms. They're not taking care of the disease itself. They're just getting worse. And is there anything we can do for that? And sometimes the answer is yes. A lot of times the answer is yes, actually. And then we look at their blood work. And I mean, I can tell you, I can show you all the issues with your metabolism. I can show you all the problems. I can show you your fasting insulin. I can show you your fasting leptin, which is another hormone. People's testosterone is in the tank, or women are going through premature menopause and their thyroid dysfunction. A woman has PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. They may have autoimmune issues. And I can trace all those things back to diet. And I can show them, like, if you change your diet in this way, you will get this result, and you will see these changes on your blood work the next time we do it. And you'll see these changes in your health. You know, your Hashimoto's antibodies will come right down, and we'll be able to track that with blood work. Your symptoms will improve. Your Crohn's disease will go away. Your rheumatoid arthritis will largely disappear. Multiple sclerosis. I have patients with multiple sclerosis who were wheelchair bound because they had such multiple sclerosis, for those who don't know, is an autoimmune disease that attacks the nerves, and they attack the myelination around the nerves, and that causes dysfunction of the nerve fibers. And you get this, you know, it's basically you have a computer with wires that go off somewhere, and you're just basically cutting that wire, right? And so I've had patients that were wheelchair bound, and they went on to a strict red meat and water diet. And there's reasons for that, why the ruminant meats like cow and lamb, goat, venison, those are the best, because they ferment the plants that they eat first, and then they digest, as opposed to pigs, chicken, fish, which are monogastrics like we are, that absorb first and break down and detoxify second with their liver. And so if they're eating things that they're not designed to eat either, which farmed animals are, they're fed a bunch of corn and soy and garbage like that, and wheat, that they're not able to detoxify these things out as well as like a cow, even when they're being fed something they're not supposed to, because they ferment the stuff first before they absorb it. They're actually better able at filtering out this garbage so it doesn't get into the meat, so it doesn't get into you. And so people, as far as I can tell, autoimmunity is your body reacting to plant toxins or other sorts of noxious chemicals getting into your body, and your body making antibodies towards them, and you're getting hit in the crossfire. They think that, oh, there's a sensitizing reaction, and then your body starts attacking yourself, and you sensitize to your thyroid or something else. But that doesn't actually fit the observed phenomenon, because when people stop eating plants entirely, we can measure it. The antibodies just go down. And we see there's actually clinical trials showing that people with Crohn's disease, when they go on what's called an elemental diet, which is a very processed food diet, it's but it's just macros and micros. It's like a shake, and it's generally ketogenic because it was originally designed for kids with epilepsy. And we have 100 years of data on high animal fat, meat-based ketogenic diets being the only treatment for epilepsy for decades, until we started getting pharmacology for it. And then we just went, yeah, it's fine. Just give them a pill. Very lazy stuff. But the diet works absolutely amazingly well. We have 100 years of evidence for that. And so they have these things, and centers will still use that, like Johns Hopkins, at least last time I checked, that was years ago, but they still use ketogenic diets to treat their epilepsy patients. And sometimes you'll see that at the Children's Hospital as well. They'll sometimes incorporate that if they're like refractory, there's just no hope left. Okay, well, you can try this. Why don't you try that first? You say, hey, change your diet. Your kid won't have seizures, or may not have seizures. If they do, then we can add medication. Why wouldn't you start with that? But anyway, so you have this elemental diet, and they give these people with Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disease, and that causes bloody diarrhea and upset stomach, and it's very painful. It's a very hard disease to live with. And you give them this elemental diet, and they found in randomized controlled trials that in humans, that just putting them on an elemental diet, just the macros and micros they need and nothing else, that was a better treatment for an acute flare-up of Crohn's than prednisone, steroids, right? So just not eating certain things was a better treatment than steroids, which is the gold standard. And there was another study with Crohn's again, where they looked at eliminating out carbs and fiber. And they found that when you eliminated carbs and fiber from the diet, that people could stay in remission up to 51 months, which is over 4 years. And they contrasted that with a control group that didn't take out carbs and fiber. And they stayed in remission on average 0 months, right? So it was a massive contrast. And this was all without medication, right? So 51 months in remission without medication. right? Just by eliminating carbs and fiber. And so that means that the carbs or the fiber, or maybe both, or something that comes along with one or both, is what is causing Crohn's, right? Your body's reacting to it. So your body's reacting to this. You're making antibodies. And then when you eliminate these things out, and I see this in practice all the time, like Hashimoto is very easy to test their antibodies, and you just see just come right down, right? So you can measure this, and you certainly measure it in people's symptomatology. They just go away. So if the body was already sensitized and it say, okay, well, we're going to attack it, we're just going to kill this thyroid, come what may, you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see those antibodies just coming right down, and then all of a sudden they go. I had a patient that went on a trip and says, I'll just eat whatever with my wife and we'll enjoy ourselves. Bam, the antibodies shot up, and then they slowly come down again. So this is something that you can measure. This is a cause and effect relationship. You remove something, and the effect goes away. You bring that something back, and the effect comes back. Right? That's cause and effect. Right? So we're seeing that, and so I can tell people that and say, look, this is what you're going to see. This is what's going to happen. And this is what we'll see on your blood work. And this is what you'll see in your symptoms. And they see that. And then we come back and we see on their blood work exactly those things happen. And, sometimes there's maybe a bit of a discrepancy on something. We use stress, different exercise levels, sleep, family issues. These can all play a role as well. But by and large, you'll see exactly those changes, right? And maybe a little blip here and there. Okay, well, this could be from stress. Yeah, things have been really tough with work and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that makes sense. We'll keep an eye on that. We need to fix that in these other ways. But all these other things are all getting better. So everything's all getting better. That's, might be due to, severe stress, things like that. So, you look at those things. But by and large, that's just what happens. You see these things improve dramatically. And you just say, these are wrong because of your eating these things. And then you take those things away, you should see these results. And that's exactly what they see. And people's testosterone, like I've seen exactly one man whose testosterone didn't jump up after going on a carnivore diet for a few months. Everything else improved.
What happened to this dude?
Well, everything else was improving dramatically.
But just his testosterone didn't
just stayed the same.
Yeah.
It wasn't like bottomed out or anything like that. It was probably it's pretty normal for his age. But he had a lot of stress. Even though he dealt very well with stress, it doesn't mean that the stress wasn't there.
Yeah.
As we had a lot of stress at home and at work. And so he just didn't see this change too much. Fine. We'll keep an eye on that. He's doing better in every other way. And we try to address the stress and try to keep getting him, in a better and better situation. I would expect that to come up. Everybody else comes up. I had a 72-year-old man who tripled his testosterone level, right? He came back to the state of a healthy 25-year-old man.
That's so good.
Threw his Viagra out.
I want to know.
Yeah. He's never been soft since.
Funny you should mention that, but he came in and he was absolutely bouncing off the walls. He had tons of energy, just felt amazing. And he's just, I feel like a teenager again. And it's like, I apologize for the crassness of it, but
I'm going to be a dad.
But that was
tell by the boner, Greg. Put it away.
But he was saying that, he's like, yeah, I just feel amazing. I just feel like a teenager again. Like, all I want to do is work out and fuck my wife. I'm like, oh. Well, that's a good thing. That's definitely a positive. I mentioned that to a couple older ladies. And they're like, oh, God, just stay the hell away from me.
What's his home phone number?
How come you think with the internet, obviously this diet information so readily available, why do you think it's not more popular? Like sports teams, for example, that want to get an edge, like why aren't we seeing Chicago Bulls all carnivores? Like how come?
Well, funny you mentioned that. I mean, Michael Jordan did eat a heavy meat-based diet, and he and his trainers figured out based on his blood work and his performance and all these other sorts of things that the best meal that he could have on game day was a big ass fatty steak 5 hours before the game. That was his game day meal. He didn't eat anything else. Right? He just ate a big fat ass steak.
Scottie Pippen might have eaten meat too, eh?
Yeah. And so the thing is that, historically, a lot of people ate a lot of meat. The golden era bodybuilders, Vince Gironda, Serge Nubret, they were just all steak and eggs, steak and eggs, steak and eggs. Serge Nubret, who was Arnold Schwarzenegger's body idol growing up, he ate 6 pounds of horse meat a day. And the guy looked like a freaking horse. He was absolutely jacked. And Vince Gironda was the same way. Now, once a week, he would eat carbs, and he's all because you need carbs to replenish your glycogen in your liver. And it's like, that's actually not the case, but that's what people thought back then. Other than that, it was steak and eggs. So you're
thinking maybe a lot of these guys are borderline carnivores without sort of promoting it? Or?
Well, they were. Gironda was. I mean, and that's the thing. He looked at human nutrition the same way I did, which is like, what have humans been eating the longest, right? And that's meat. We've been apex predators for millions of years. And apex predators are by definition carnivores, and we were eating big megafauna with very high fat. Well, but wild animals, very, very lean. You still need to avoid fat. Bullshit. We weren't eating lean meat. We were eating fatty meat. We were eating the bigger, fattier animals. Whales, very lean, right? It was wild, so it must be lean. Seals, polar bears, walruses, those sorts of things. Mammoths. That's what we were eating. And so we're eating very high fat. When those megafauna died out, that's when we started growing the largest animals we had around, which were the bovine and cows, and we were getting milk and dairy, and we're able to get more fat out of that, right? That's when we switched to that, was when we didn't have big fatty meat available to us, and we needed that fat. So we needed fat. But Gironda looked at that. I saw sort of an interview with him, or talking about it, writing it up. How someone asked him, it's like, oh, there's this new health diet, and this guy wrote this book, and this guy wrote that book, and what do you think? And he's like, I haven't read anything about nutrition from anyone who's been alive in the last 50,000 years. Like, I just don't. That's not how I look at this. I look at this from our own biology and physiology. Totally correct. He had the one thing about carbs needing that to replenish glycogen, which is actually incorrect. There are studies showing that if you in human athletes, and you have carb fueled athletes and keto athletes, that the ketogenic athletes, the fat fueled athletes, will replenish their muscle and liver glycogen faster than the carb fueled athletes sucking down sugar waters. Like if you're doing a big race, see all these guys just sucking down sugar packets and gels and things like that. If you're fat adapted, you'll replenish your glycogen faster than they will sucking those things down.
How mid-race?
For your body just does it on your fat stores.
So you don't eat anything.
Yeah,
so I'm actually going to, after this run, I thought I want to increase the kilometers and maybe do the 80 one day. Because I just did a one leg of an 80 kilometer race.
Mm-hmm.
So the next, I'm going to do a half marathon in August. Mm-hmm. Do you suggest just don't take any gels, nothing?
Yeah, definitely no gels.
Bareback.
If you just get fat adapted, right? Just like you did, you can take a few weeks or whatever, and now you're feeling good and ready to go. You need to be fat adapted. And then once you're there, you're running on your fat stores. And even as a slim guy like you have weeks of energy available to you without having to eat.
I did I panicked again before I do it every time. And I had some boiled eggs and about half an hour, because I did leg 2, I didn't start running till 9 o'clock, and I'd already had 2 coffees. And I started to feel like, oh shit, I might need some food because I don't want to get the shakes or something like that. I know what you're going to say, I shouldn't have the coffees, which is probably true. Yeah. But I had a boiled egg, and then my first 3 Ks, every burp was like a bit of the boiled egg coming up, and I regretted it so bad. And now I'm thinking about it, I should have just not eaten. And then when I finished the race, because I had 2 boiled eggs, I should have just had my 2 boiled eggs after the race, and I probably wouldn't even be sore right now.
Yeah. And so I actually interviewed a guy named Alex McDonald, who is over in Sydney, and he wasn't a runner before this. He wasn't a big runner, never ran a marathon before, or anything close to that distance before. But he'd been ketogenic carnivore for like 12 years, keto
ahead of his time
for the start of that. And then 5 years or so carnivore. Around there anyway. So keto first, but either way, ketogenic, no carbs. And he'd been an athlete and doing all sorts of different sports and things like that, and felt great, and always felt great. He's like, oh, this is bullshit that you need carbs. And so he looked into the biochemistry. There's Professor Tim Noakes of South Africa showing this in randomized controlled crossover trials in athletes that actually, you get the same output with and without carbohydrates. It's just that without carbohydrates, you tapped into your fat stores, and so you never have to refuel. You just keep going.
God mode.
Yeah, exactly. And so he just said, you know what, I'm gonna prove it.
Yeah.
And so he went out and he decided he was going to run 5 marathons in 5 consecutive days without eating the entire time. So he ate Sunday night, then he ran a marathon Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Friday he ran the Sydney Marathon. and didn't eat the entire time. And he actually wasn't even really all that hungry afterwards. He had this whole big tomahawk all set up. That's going to be my reward. He's like, I don't even really feel like it. Had like two burger patties.
That is ridiculous.
So what was he fueling off? Just water?
Fat.
And that's it.
Is he skinny
water. Or? Yeah, he's like you.
Literally just water and
he's slimmer than me, man. Like he does not have much body fat on him. You gotta understand, even you right now being very slender, you have like 100,000 calories stored in your fat right now.
So
put down the plums.
Yeah.
The pre-race egg. I can't believe I pre-raced egg. Every year I panic and do something wrong.
I often wonder like about the coffee as well, because it's not, that takes away from your lung capacity too, doesn't it? Caffeine. Like, like they say, like when you're surfing,
I feel
better though, right? Because we talked about that when I stopped coffee and went for a run. I felt fucked,
sluggish.
But like you kind of want it, but doesn't it diminish your lung capacity a bit? They say caffeine. It's not great. It's a good
question. I haven't looked into that particular side of it, but I do know that I certainly have a lot better energy, much more consistent. Like you may get a spike with the caffeine, but then it's up and then you're and it can sort of change your energy dynamics. Well, normally if your body's just working normally and you're just producing all the energy that you need for what you're doing, you just feel great. And you're producing all this energy, and the harder I work, the more energy I burn, the better I feel, the harder I want to go. So it's sort of a positive feedback on just like, I'm just going to work as hard as I can. Whereas other time it takes a bit of self-start. It's like sort of like a self-starting motor, like one of those old school, like electric motors. But once it gets going, it goes.
Yeah.
And if you have the caffeine that can give you that bit of a burst, okay, that's going to give you the motivation to go out and do something. But you'll get that crash and it's not necessarily going to be as good. And you're just sort of up here, but it's not, I don't know, it's sort of different. It's just, to me, I feel much better and I get better workouts without it. But that's when I'm used to not having it in my system. Whereas if you're going the other way around, it can take a while to get used to it the other way. But I find I have much better, much more consistent energy. One thing that you can do is it can affect negatively your lungs in the sense that it generally has a lot high amount of dust and mold. I'm particularly allergic to dust and mold. And so when I drink coffee, most cups of coffee will give me asthma. And I'll just start reacting to it. Yeah, I'll just feel it tightening up. Whereas if I take a caffeine pill, it doesn't do that. And so what I would suggest is if you guys did want to have caffeine, maybe ditch the coffee side of things, start with a caffeine pill, take like a no dose or something like that, and maybe see that, do that instead, because you're at least going to get rid of all the different plant toxins. I mean, caffeine is a plant toxin, right? It's a neurotoxin and an insecticide that was developed to fry the brains of insects trying to eat that plant. And so that's probably not what you want to put in your body. But coffee also has 150,000 other chemicals besides caffeine. So you might as well at least get rid of those if you want the caffeine. If all you want is the caffeine, then just get the caffeine, I
don't even know what I want. I know I want the coffee, but I don't know if it's the caffeine or the
comfort.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Sorry, in here I have chicken broth.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this? So every morning I run and then I crave the chicken broth.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a natural electrolytes?
Probably.
Because I put a bunch of salt in it.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something like, I was going to show you these electrolytes here. That's my only issue. I've been on carnivore forums and stuff, and I do see a lot of other people on the carnivore diet do struggle with their electrolytes. And is that because what I read is you probably don't have the right balance of fat and protein and salt and water. And once you get on top of them, you might not need to supplement with electrolytes, but I definitely feel a bit crampy and stuff if I don't have my salty chicken broth or electrolytes.
Yeah. Could be. I mean, the thing is that I wonder how many of them are actually having electrolyte issues or just, coming to that conclusion that that's the cause of their problems. Most people, the vast majority of people that I see that have leg cramps, it's because of dehydration. They're not getting enough.
It's just water.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll see this in these groups where they're saying, I'm taking all the electrolytes. I'm taking it multiple times a day. I'm just dumping, salt in my water. And it's just like, I'm just keep getting cramps. I was like, well, it's clearly not the electrolytes then, right? Because you've addressed that and you're still getting them. So that's not it. That's not, you don't do more of the same. It's another problem. And I just say, look, when you're eating a lot of electrolytes, you can actually increase your body's demand for water as well as you get a relative dehydration. And so you can go the other way. You can drink way too much water and you can actually wash out too much sodium, but it's actually very difficult to do that. It's a lot of water that you have to drink. And I mean, like gallons and gallons. I used to drink 2 gallons of water a day in my playing days. And that's how I felt the best on carnivore. And so, and I don't use salt, you know.
You don't add any salt at all?
No, not anymore. I would always salt to taste. I just tell people salt to taste, you know, let your body, you know, do the talking, right? So if your body's saying, ooh, I want that, you know, chicken stock with water, with salt, fine. You know, as you go, you may find that you want it less and less. Now my tastes run to the fact that I don't like salt anymore. And so if I go out somewhere and they make the meat, it's almost always too salty. Bacon just tastes like a salt lick to me now.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is way too much. And so I just make my steaks and I just make it without salt now. And that tastes like salted steak used to taste. So that tastes right to me. And so, but whatever your body's telling you, just have that amount of salt, but don't go crazy. I have tested hundreds of people's bloods who go on carnivore and under my supervision, and I've never once seen their electrolytes go out of balance. Not once.
Yeah.
Most people start with low magnesium, but they don't get lower on a carnivore diet unless they're drinking a lot of coffee, because coffee can strip out your body of magnesium. And so, but typically it's rare that they're in a level of magnesium that you normally associate with actual cramping.
Do you know, it's funny you mentioned that. I've tried every different magnesium supplement and they all affect me badly in my tummy. Mm-hmm. And it's like gurgling and could my issue maybe be a magnesium thing that I'm not absorbing it with the cramps?
I mean,
because I've cramped forever on every diet I've ever been on. I've consistently had cramps, or am I just not drinking enough water?
Well, you could you very well be not drinking enough water. How much water are you drinking?
Quite a lot, I think. I always forget though. Like, yeah.
So how much would you say, like on an average day, a typical day?
I'd say 2 or 3 of them.
Okay.
So that would be 3 liters.
Yeah. I mean, look, 3 liters is probably pretty good for most people. You do a lot of running, you know, you do a lot of exercise. You probably need a bit more. It's hot. We're getting into the winter months, but typically it's pretty damn hot. And so you might need a bit more of a demand as well. I would just try it out. You know, if you're starting to get crampy, just try drinking more water. I mean, because you're drinking electrolytes, but you're drinking electrolytes in water. So is it the water or is it the electrolytes?
Yeah.
Right. So just try the water and see how you go. Maybe it's electrolytes. It could very well be. It's generally going to be magnesium though. When I see people in the hospital, you get people that are clinically unwell. They get low sodium, hyponatremia, hypokalemia, which is low potassium. That's life-threatening. And so it's very serious. And so we track that very closely, and your body keeps that in homeostasis very, very carefully, because when it goes too low or too high, you can die and you have very serious symptoms. Not once have I ever seen someone with true hypokalemia or hypernatremia get cramps. That's not how they present. You get low sodium, you get confused, you go into a coma, you get seizures and you die. And hypokalemia, low potassium, you start getting arrhythmias, start getting atrial fibrillation, racing heartbeat, you get an arrhythmia and you die, right? So I don't see them getting cramps. I mean, potentially you could, but it's not that common that when I see someone with diagnosed clinically deficient potassium, that they actually are getting cramps as part of that. They're getting other things, and they're getting dysregulation of their heart and the electrochemistry of their heart and the electrochemistry of the brain for sodium. But you just don't see cramps all that often. They're not just cramping like hell. I'm like, oh Jesus, you know. Magnesium, yeah. When people get really low magnesium, they get cramps. And so when someone's in the hospital, they start getting cramps, you check them for magnesium. Most of the time, it's generally going to be low, because the thing is that the average the reference ranges that we use for labs are the average for the community. They're not, but we look at them as optimal. Oh, as long as it's in range. Is it in range? Yes, good. That's good. Is it above range? Oh, that's too high. It's too low. Oh, that's too low. So we're looking at that range as if it's the optimal range. That's where everyone should be, but that's not what they are, and they're not even advertised as such. They are the average for the community. So every single lab in Perth has a different reference range, just because they've had a different few thousand people that came in and they tested them all, and that's the reference range. And every lab on Earth has a different reference range because they all have different populations that have come in. But in the same cities, they have different reference ranges at the different clinics. So that's not what that is. It's not the ideal range. That's the average range. But doctors don't know that, and patients don't know that. And so we're treating this as the optimal range, and they're not. And so the optimal range for magnesium and these sorts of things is actually higher than that. Basically, if you're not on the high end of the magnesium, you're probably low.
Is that consistent with all doctors and that in the bloods with that range, and you get the black one in bold when it's not in the range? Yeah. Does everyone do that?
Yeah.
Because urea, is that something to do with hydration? Kidneys, that's always black and above the range.
It means you eat more protein and probably not eating enough fat.
I mean, I need more protein.
More fat.
You're
eating a lot of protein.
Yeah.
And you probably need a bit more fat.
Okay.
Yeah. So urea going up could go up because your kidneys aren't filtering it out. But if that were the case, then your creatinine would go up at the same time. So creatinine is really what you look at for kidney filtration. And so a lot of people eating more meat, they can quite often see that their urea goes up. Urea is a metabolite of amino acid metabolization for energy, because the vast majority of amino acids and protein that you ingest actually get used as the building blocks and physical materials for your body. Every single molecule that your DNA codes for is a protein. It's strings of amino acids. And so those 3 base pairs code for an amino acid. And you just go this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. It's just a chain. It goes like this, and then they start folding in weird chemical ways, and you have this little molecule. And they'll stick carbohydrates and lipids and all these other things on it after that, according to your own cellular biochemistry. But it starts by a string of amino acids, and so that's what your amino acids are used for. This is the whole idea of calories are pretty outdated, because you don't use all these things, these macronutrients that you could use protein as an energy source, but you typically don't unless you have to, because you use it as building blocks, as structural materials to make all the different molecules that you use. So you're eating protein so you can make proteins. You're not eating protein so you can just turn that into glucose and make that into energy, right? So you don't get calories from these things. You're not using them as energy, so it doesn't really follow. So if you are seeing your urea go up, so urea comes from when you have an amino acid that have a nitrogen in there, right? And so when you want to use that for energy, you have to cleave out that nitrogen, and then you use the rest of the molecule and use that chemical energy to use as energy in your body. And then that nitrogen gets turned into ammonia, and ammonia gets turned into urea. And then urea actually has properties in your body that's beneficial. And then it gets eliminated in the kidneys. And so if you are not filtering out, if your filtration rate goes down, then yeah, sure, your urea could go up, but your creatinine would go up, and all these other things would go up as well, because you're just storing more things in your body. And your electrolytes will get all crazy too. You'd have too much potassium and sodium because you're not eliminating out some of these things. And so that's not typically what we see with people on carnivore, or keto, or just eating more meat, that their urea goes up, but their creatinine stays at the same level. So, okay, so that's not a filtration rate. Also, people that get pneumonia, that urea can go up. They get other diseases and illnesses that urea can go up. It can go up for other reasons too. But it's only a filtration issue if the creatinine goes up. So you really just look at the creatinine, and that's what you look at.
Would 96 be an accurate creatinine measurement? I think that's what mine was.
Yeah, more water. Yeah, so going into the cramps, I'd say you want more water there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Was your doctor surprised your blood pressure regulated and went normal? What did he ever say?
Yeah. So my blood pressure is really good now.
Yeah.
It was super high. He can't get past the cholesterol, because obviously when you're on carnivore, your cholesterol goes up, and
if you're fit.
If you're fit.
Only if you're fit.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that?
That was that lean mass hyperresponder study that we were talking about before. This is just something that's been observed. They found that people that were on these, animal-based, high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets, because when you go on a ketogenic diet, you get rid of carbohydrates. So what do you replace it with? Fat and protein, right? Where does that fat and protein come from? Typically meat. You could do it on a vegetarian diet, but it's very difficult. You basically have to drink canola oil and take a bunch of supplements and things like that, and because it's very deficient. But so they don't. So all these ketogenic diets that in the studies anyway, we look at thousands of randomized control. There is no diet that has been studied more rigorously than the ketogenic diet. And a carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet, and it's specifically a meat-based ketogenic diet, which is all these studies are meat-based ketogenic diets. And so when they found this, if people were on these high-fat meat-based ketogenic diets, their cholesterol came up, LDL came up, and HDL came up, and triglycerides went down. They're like, well, hold on, all that stuff looks good. And their insulin came down, and their leptin came down, their testosterone went up, and their thyroid improved, and they lost weight, and they're feeling good, and all these diseases reverse. And it's like, well, why are we saying this is a bad thing? You know? That doesn't make sense. And so a guy named Dave Feldman started asking that question, like, well, hold on a second. Well, maybe this is just a different cohort. Maybe this doesn't apply to these people they're eating this way. Maybe cholesterol isn't, it's just like cholesterol up equals heart disease. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's different. Maybe there's more going on to it, which are all fair questions to ask. You shouldn't just blindly go, no, that's what we've always thought. So that's obviously nothing's ever going to change. Like, things change all the time. We constantly are revamping our understanding of things. And so he just said, okay, we'll see these people. They all seem to be lean. They all seem to be healthy. They all seem to be people that have reversed a lot of disease and are really healthy now. And so they're lean mass, but their cholesterol is just spiking up. So they're hyper responding to this. So they call it lean mass hyper responders. That's the name that they came up with. And so they just found that these people, and they actually did a study looking at this, and they found that people that were actually had a higher BMI, were overweight, actually had lower response to their LDL, actually would have lower LDL, and as they got healthier and fitter and skinnier, that the LDL came up and up and up. And so it's like, well, that's going in the direction of good health. Why are we saying that that's a bad thing? And so all these things are pointing towards good health, and we're saying, no, it's bad. Shut it down. Go back to having diabetes and cancer. Just no. It's like, that's obviously we're looking at this wrong. So they started looking at it and saying, okay, well, why don't we just follow these people? There are a lot of people out there that aren't going back, that don't believe the cholesterol theory of heart disease, and they're going to roll with this. And so let's study them. And Dave Feldman was included in that. He's like, yeah, I'm one of these people. I feel great. I'm not going anywhere else. And so they have, I don't know how many people, like well over 100, I believe. And they've just followed these people for years. I probably should have joined in as well, because I'd be in that category. You'd be in that category, And so they followed these guys for years, on average 4.7 years, being on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, and with so-called high LDL cholesterol, up in the range of familial hypercholesterolemia, where people that have genetically high, so-called high LDL, I think it's perfectly normal. I think that's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Mine was 8 for the record. The total cholesterol was over 10. Yeah, but just the LDL. Hey.
Yeah, that'd be quite typical of this. Yeah, so I'd say you would be in that category. Yeah. And in those people, they fall on average 4.7 years with this high cholesterol on this high-fat meat-based ketogenic diet. They found no progression in their atherosclerosis. They did angiograms and said no progression. And in fact, the trend was decline of atherosclerosis, was actually reversal of atherosclerosis. So it's still preliminary. They're still doing these things. They've been doing this for years, but they're still getting data points, and they're publishing along the way. Now, the most recent data dump was that there was no progression. And I have one of the top lipidologists in the world dealing with this, and he is of that camp that LDL directly causes heart disease. And he said in the write-up, he said, look, I still believe that LDL is a direct cause, a dose-dependent response cause of atherosclerosis. But it appears that in this population, it's not. And so they're going to keep looking at that. But, the fact of the matter is that, the reason that people say that cholesterol causes heart disease is based on epidemiology, and they have actually no business saying that cholesterol causes heart disease, because there are no studies that can show causation that have showed that relationship, that cause and effect relationship. None. There's nothing. There are no studies extant in the literature showing that there is a cause and effect relationship between cholesterol and heart disease. So, but this Mendelian randomized, it's not just because you put the word randomized in it doesn't mean it's a randomized controlled trial. It's epidemiology, it's observation. And in fact, a lot of these things, they looked at, well, these people have genetics that generally we associate with higher cholesterol. And that was like, so you didn't check their cholesterol? You just went on their genetics and usually they have higher. So you didn't check their freaking cholesterol. So how? We're stopping there. I mean, it's just like, no, we're not even going to read the rest of this paper. It's a waste of time. There's nothing that shows cause and effect. Nothing. There are exactly 5 studies that were randomized controlled trials that could show cause and effect. 5. They were done pre-1980s.
And we're still going off that.
No, we're not going off them at all because they didn't show it.
Yeah.
They showed no relationship between lowering cholesterol, lowering LDL, and developing heart disease. And 2 of them showed harm. One of the best ones, this was with thousands of patients. They were all with thousands of patients. One was with nearly 10,000 patients. It was 9,600 patients that were institutionalized over a period of over 5 years. And so the researcher could perfectly control their meals and their ins and outs because they were in like institutions, right? And they controlled every single meal. And so they had like a more traditional diet with, butter and fatty meat and things like that. Or they replaced that out with more lean meats and margarine, right? So they had more unsaturated fats, or replaced saturated fats with unsaturated fats. And they could control every meal. Normally you send people home and say, hey, you go eat, but keep eating this. You don't know what they're doing, right? So it's not very controlled. This is very controlled, right? As controlled as it's possible to get in a nutritional study. Literally, there are no nutritional studies that come close to this, right? They're all surveys. They say, hey, what did you eat last year? Swear to God, like that's out of Harvard. They're doing this. The nurses study with Dr. Walter Willett, who invented this sort of protocol of basically giving a nutritional survey. And these are all ones saying, oh, meat's so bad. And this is what they do. They give a bunch of nurses an email and they say, hey, what'd you eat last year? It's like, just figure it out. There's like every meal, not, hey, can you keep track of every meal you have this year? What did you eat last year? I'm like, oh, come on. I mean, it's just stupid. And so obviously it's not going to be good. So this was very as controlled as it's possible to get in human conditions, right? They controlled every meal. They reduced saturated fat with unsaturated vegetable oils and margarine and followed them for years. And what happened? Well, they did indeed lower their LDL cholesterol. But is LDL a disease? No. Atherosclerosis is a disease. Heart attack, strokes, those are the negative outcomes from this disease, right? So cholesterol is not a disease. Okay, so we lowered that. And that's what they're all doing. Oh, let's lower cholesterol, lower cholesterol, lower cholesterol. Cholesterol is not a disease. Why are we lowering that? Right? Well, because it causes heart disease. Oh, okay. Well, let's see. We lowered LDL cholesterol in this study, 10,000 patients, perfectly controlled. As a result, they lowered their LDL cholesterol and more of them died of heart attacks and strokes. So why aren't we going on that study? Oh, that's because the scientists buried it for 40 freaking years. It was only uncovered a few years ago by Dr. Ramsden at the NIH, who dug this out because he found the sons of one of the original researchers. And he found an abstract for this. We're sort of talking about it. He's like, hey, do you have the rest of this study? We can't find it anywhere. And they're like, hey, we'll look through our dad's things. And they were like, hey, yeah, we found this. They had old floppy disks and things like that and microfiche, and they had like to extract this out. And they found all this data, just years of data on 10,000 people, just massive study, really well done. And it just blew the case open. It's just they did not support at all the cholesterol hypothesis.
So whose interest was to bury that study?
Sugar companies, processed foods, they're the ones who were pushing this stuff.
Big pharma kind of.
I don't know if it was big pharma at the time, but it was certainly big food. Like well, the Sugar Research Association, now called the Sugar Research Foundation, now called the Sugar Association. They actually they paid off people like Ansel Keys and professors from Harvard and elsewhere to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease, when it's much more likely to be sugar, because there were a lot of independent researchers that came to the conclusion that sugar was the likely cause of heart disease. And we got to cover that up. And so it was just like the tobacco companies that just put out a whole bunch of propaganda and fake studies that they paid people off to falsify. in order to paint the, say that cigarettes don't cause cancer and aren't addictive and don't cause emphysema and all that sort of stuff. And so the sugar companies did the exact same thing. And that's not like an accusation. That's the fact. That's a part of the historical record now, because the Journal of the American Medical Association published in 2016 actual internal memos from the Sugar Research Foundation detailing how they paid off these people and what they paid them. We had their contracts. We know what they got paid. They got paid $6,500 in their currency. That's the equivalent of $55,000 now, right? So they drove off in a sweet mid-sized sedan, and they sold out the fate of the world, right? I mean, literally, that's what $55,000. What does that buy you? Really? I mean, that's what you sold your soul for, and the billions of people around the world. There are 400 million people in India right now eating a plant-based diet and running away scared from meat, who have diabetes because of these assholes who said that, right? And that's what it's for. I mean, they got $6,500, and that's it. So Ansel Keys was one of the original researchers on that. It's called the Minnesota Coronary Study. Coronary heart study. And Ansel Keys was one of these guys who's a known paid shill for the sugar companies. And so they saw this and they went, oh, that's bad. And they just buried it. And it got uncovered, 40 years later. So if these came out in the 70s and been like, this is bullshit. And that was, people were, Dr. Yudkin from the UK. I mean, he was all over this, back then. He was saying, no, this is sugar. He wrote a book called Sweet, White, Deadly, and how sugar is causing all these problems and diseases. And as soon as the USDA, because that was the thing, one of those professors from Harvard who was paid off in those memos published from the sugar companies, one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and he was the one who authored and published the USDA declaration saying that cholesterol caused heart disease. And as soon as the teacher says so, it's like, oh, well, that was it. The government says so. I mean, how many times has that gone wrong? I mean, why are we listening to go, oh, but the government said, oh, it must be true. I mean, they wouldn't say that if it wasn't. Like, have you met the government? It's like, that's exactly what they do. That's all they do, And so, obviously people, it's not that necessarily the institution has malice, but there are people within the institution who may have malice or may not have malice, but may have ties, financial ties that you don't know about, or ideological ties. No one even knew about this. They say that, well, meat causes cancer. It's a processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen, according to the WHO. Okay, well, how did they come to that conclusion? They had a tribunal that sort of met and said, hey, let's look at the evidence and see. And first of all, you're asking loaded questions. You're saying, hey, is meat harmful? Does meat cause cancer? Let's look at what about, is meat good for you? Does meat cause good health? Why don't you look at that? Why don't you ask that question? Or what happens when you eat meat? That's an even better question. Is it good or bad? I don't know. Let's just see, right? They're asking the negative. They're saying, how bad is meat? Let's find out, And so you're only going to look at things on that lower half, right? You're not going to look at things on the upper half. And so the WHO came to this conclusion in 2015, but did they? They had certain people on that group who completely disagreed with the conclusion that tribunal came to, but they were outvoted. And there was one guy, I can't recall his name at the moment, but people can look him up. He came out publicly and said that was the most difficult thing he's ever had to go through in his professional career, because he saw them throw out hundreds of high quality studies that showed absolutely no connection or even correlation between the consumption of meat, even processed meat, and certainly, unprocessed meat, and cancer, in favor of about 30 studies out of over 800 that had very weak associations, had a lot of confounding factors, meaning that they didn't control for variables like they were more likely to smoke, they were more likely to drink, they were more likely to do all sorts of other things that could increase their risk of cancer. They also, some of these studies, they said meat, but what did they consider meat? Well, they said anything that could have an ingredient that was meat. That was meat. So pizza was Mac. Meat. Yeah. Fast food in general, including the fries and the drink.
I've heard that
and
before.
The bun.
They lump into one, don't they?
That's it. And so if it has meat, well, if you just get rid of all the meat, well, what are you getting rid of the meat? What are you getting rid of with the meat? Right? That's the question to ask. So don't eat pizza, don't eat fast food, don't eat lasagna, don't have sandwiches. Well, that's all meat. And so obviously all the benefits come from not eating meat. No, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Right? This is the only good thing in there. You have, 50 gram, meat patty in there, and just looks like, and the rest of it's just all plants and sugar and crap. And it's just like, obviously it's that 50 grams of meat that was doing it. And like, you have to be a special kind of stupid to think that, or try to pass it off. So that's the thing. A lot of these studies that found a very weak at best association, and association is not causation.
Do you ever get like a sinister view where they're trying to make everyone sick so that they can make money from making people healthy again? Do you think it goes that far, or do you just think it's people looking after their own interests that say own a sugar, like you own Coca-Cola, you want everything to make Coke look good?
Yeah, well, I think that's enough. I don't think you need to go further than that. I think there probably are people that don't care that this is hurting people. I don't know if they're necessarily intending to hurt people, but I think there are people that understand what's going on and that this is hurting people and that they're profiting off of that harm and they don't give a shit. The reason I say that is because I'm not stupid, but also because there's a guy named Callie Means who is a whistleblower from the big food and big pharmacy groups. Right. So he's consulted with them for years, and, bright guy, went to, Stanford and I think Harvard Business School, something like that. Anyway, very, very, elite sort of education, was in these sort of elite, circles in America in business. And he has come out saying that these people know that the processed food is making us sick. They're giving us metabolic disease, metabolic dysfunction, and causing a lot of harm. And that they're fine with that because they then sell us on the back end all these medications that don't cure these diseases. They just perpetuate them, and they just allow us to deal with them and live with them and handle them. And he said, I know that they know this because I've been in the board meetings with them when they said it. And I believe it was him, if not another whistleblower, who said that one of these pharmaceutical executives said, just in a sort of passing remark, said, "Oh, you know what my favorite drug is that our company makes?" And like, I don't know, something that saves kids from leukemia, something, noble like that. No, he said that his favorite medication that his company made were any medication that caused side effects that they had drugs that treated. And it's like, you're a piece of shit.
Double down.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing. He wants harm to happen to people. So like you're saying, he's like, is there a sinister thing? Well, certainly in some people, yeah. Or maybe they're just too blinded by their greed to understand how sinister they are being. But they're saying that they want, it's not that big a deal. It just makes their stomach upset, and you just give them this and that takes care of it. Well, no, actually, because it's causing stomach upset for a reason. What's going on there? What's happening 10 years, 20 years down the line? What happens 10 years, 20 years down the line with the subsequent medication that you've put them on? And then you have them on another medication to treat the side effects of that one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And you have people, and this is something that is taught in medical schools all the time. You have something called a prescription cascade, where you start with one medication for blood pressure or for cholesterol, and that gives symptoms, and you put them on another medication that deal with that symptoms, and you get something else and something else and something else and something else, and all of a sudden you have this old man who's on 17 freaking medications a day.
What's it called? The
prescription cascade.
The cascade. It's fucking brutal.
Yeah.
Going back to whistleblowers, the second Boeing whistleblower
died.
Yeah.
Suicided with two holes in the back of his head.
No, wasn't it some bacterial eating?
Sure. Whatever. I mean, yeah, like whatever they got to him. I mean, that's just like, like old monarchs and things like that. It's like, oh, he died. It was just, bad food. Yeah, it wasn't the cyanide you poured in it. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Well, if you could do sort of any study, and you could get your hands on numerous volunteers, what would be like your dream study that you would sort of undertake with people?
Well, I mean, I'd certainly like to see, some sort of like randomized control trial looking at the different various diets with like a high fat meat based ketogenic carnivore diet, maybe even a ketogenic diet using plants and all that sort of nasty, disgusting, horrible things as well. And Mediterranean diet, the so-called Mediterranean diet. But what the hell is a Mediterranean diet? I mean, Egypt's on the Mediterranean, so is Tunisia, and then Spain and France and Italy. What the hell is a Mediterranean diet? It's a big ass place, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's but whatever you consider the Mediterranean diet, and the DASH diet, and the vegetarian diet, and the vegan diet, and an omnivorous diet, or whatever, you could do that. I mean, that'd be amazing. And just say, okay, well, let's just look at this and look at it from all these different sorts of endpoints. That would be great. That's a big study. But one that I really would like to get started that's probably more realistic is on cancer. And because there's ketogenic metabolic therapy used for cancer is something that we have well over 100 studies on easily with all the different kinds of cancers. Just in GBM, glioblastoma, that I treat in neurosurgery, it's a very aggressive cancer. Without treatment, your life expectancy from diagnosis is 3 months. And with full treatment, chemoradiation, and full resection, it's like 15 to 18 months. And so that's a really, really grim outlook. And yet we have smaller studies, even smaller randomized controlled studies, putting people on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, that this actually significantly prolongs life. And we've actually seen it reverse and reduce burden of disease and actually shrink down tumors in people. And there's case series, like 14, 15 cases published that say, hey, we tried this and these were the results. And that was from Cedars-Sinai Medical Centers, one of the top hospitals in America. They've published that, and now they're doing a phase 2 trial, trying to get 100, 200 people, multi-center sort of approach with these sort of dietary changes. And then there's other places like in Phoenix. There was a neurosurgical group that published their case series on this as well, seeing massive improvements. And so, that's something that I want to get tried. I actually lecture on this. I gave a lecture at a medical conference on ketogenic metabolic therapy as an adjunct to the standard of care in cancer treatment. And it's a mouthful, but that's the actual name of the talk. And that's on the internet. That's on YouTube now. And you just go through the data. And I'm just focusing mainly on GBM and neurological cancers, but it's applicable to all different kinds of cancers. And you think about it this way: like, animals in the wild don't get cancer. Animals in captivity don't get cancer unless they're being fed kibble. If they're eating their natural diet, they don't get it. If they're being fed an unnatural diet, that's when they get it. And so, dogs and cats get cancer, but not when they're fed meat exclusively. And I've spoken to vets about that specifically. And there's some vets who get it and some vets who don't. But they've had an invasion from the industries as well, that the pet food manufacturers, they're all the same people, like Mars bars and things like that. They're one of the major pet food manufacturers. And it's like science diet. And it has these marketing terms. Oh, it's science. It's the diet made by science. No, like nature made the science diet. They should just eat what the hell they eat. I mean, no zookeeper goes around going, oh, where's my say? What food manufacturer for tiger food? I need to listen to them. What goes on? You just look at what frickin' tigers eat. That's what you should eat. That's what they should eat, right? Or a polar bear or a panda or something like that. You don't need a study to figure out what a fucking koala eats.
Yeah, you don't really see lions eating chum and stuff.
I've got a good study. The Wongy study would be, we get identical twins, and they're on a normal diet, but then we put one on an exclusive carnivore diet, one on a vegan diet, and then we test their running, their VO2, everything, track it over months and see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be good.
You should do it. Have you ever looked into getting a show and doing what was that one on Netflix a few months ago people were watching?
Oh, that was like the twin things. It was that was just complete and utter crap.
I'm trying to
find the Wongy trial. I reckon the one guy might end up gay, and the other one might end up
plums in the mouth.
So that kind of plums you were talking about. Yeah. Took a couple plums a week,
2 plums.
I just can't seem to stop.
That would be fascinating. And the funniest thing would be,
so what would you do?
One identical twin goes fully vegan.
Yeah.
but healthy vegan, like we're trying to get the best result for him on an optimal vegan diet. And then the other goes on a full carnivore diet, and we test their VO2, we test their running, have other strength tests, and then at the end compare the data.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool. Imagine though it got to the end and they're exactly the same still.
Yeah,
that would be kind of fascinating.
They wouldn't be. If you did it long enough, they wouldn't be.
Well, I was thinking about your one. Would you come in with your cattle of guys and girls, like, and they'd stick to their lane and you'd put them up in markers, like, or would you make them swap diets?
You could do crossover
to see if there's any elevation or decrease in there.
You could, yeah. I mean, you definitely could. I mean, that would make it longer, you know. But
would that be fascinating to see though? If you saw a decline in someone's good health, if they went on,
yeah, you know, I mean, and you have to do those things carefully, you know, because there's you have to have a washout period, because you know, depending on the order that you do that. I mean, there was actually a study recently that came out doing that while looking at ketogenic diets, or a high fat ketogenic diet, high fat, low carb, and low fat, high carb. But because it was a crossover, you know, they looked at different sorts of markers, but then it crossed over immediately. They didn't have any washout period. And then, so it actually affected that. So what they had been doing before, depending on what diet they did before, it actually affected what happened after when they switched. And so you have to do that carefully. You have to design that well. But yeah, you could do that. I mean, if you just had enough people doing one diet or the other, you know, you could get a lot of really good information from that. If you then did a crossover, yes, that would be much, much more powerful. You had a washout period, and then you say, okay, now everyone switch tables and, you know, go again. Professor Noakes does that with athletics, for ketogenic athletics, carb fueled athletics, and he gets these people, you know, working out, doing those sorts of things, carb fueled, keto fueled, and gives them like 40. They gave them 42 days. They said they didn't really take any longer than 3 weeks, but they gave them 42 days just to be safe,
to get into ketosis.
Yeah, well, into full fat adaptation, because you'll be in ketosis within a couple of days, but there are a lot of sort of other knock-on effects you have. You'll be better able to metabolize fat and ketones and all these sorts of things better, and then utilize them better as you go, and you get different genetic changes, and you turn on and off different genes and things like that. So that's all fat adaptation. Realistically, it's going to take years, because eventually you're going to be turning on more genes and getting more mitochondria, and you just keep getting benefits from this. But either way, from an athletic point of view, typically people start feeling that they're performing as good or better within a certain period of time. So that's what you're looking for. And so they gave him 42 weeks. Long ass time. Is that 42 weeks? 42 days. And but pretty much after 3 weeks, they were pretty much fat adapted. And then they put them through trials, high intensity, endurance, all these other sorts of things, and saw what they could do. And everyone had the same output, the same, you know, maximum that they could put out. But the people that were keto fueled, fat fueled, could just keep going. They just tapped into their
endurance increase.
Yeah, so you could just keep going and keep going, keep going, keep going. But the initial bang was the same for both.
Okay.
And then they did a washout period where everyone sort of made whatever, and then they switched it and gave it 42 days again to then get people keto adapted. And so they did that crossover. So the people that were carb fueled are now keto fueled, and vice versa. And they found the same thing. Output was exactly the same, but now these guys could just keep going, and these guys couldn't.
So the keto fueled won every time.
In the sense that they didn't gas out.
Yeah.
But the maximal output was the same for both initially. Yeah. But you can keep going at a maximal output as a ketogenic athlete just forever.
Fascinating how it's so divisive, right?
That's what I was going to ask before. Your channel obviously has grown. The amount I think we did one Instagram reel, and the comments, people just going at each other. It's crazy. Hey. Yeah, religious almost.
It is, you know, it's you know, to your point before, I mean, it actually is getting more traction. And you say, well, why aren't more athletes doing this? We say they don't know about it, first of all, but it's starting to hit that threshold where people are starting to hear about it. There are more and more and more athletes going to carnivore. They're openly doing it. You know, there are a number of All Blacks rugby players that are doing this. There are a number of Australian professional rugby players that are doing this. There's a guy, what's his name? The Fox or something like that. He's like a winger in rugby league. I can't remember his full name. But he's doing this, and he was on like a news program saying, "Yeah, just eat meat. It's carnivore, and I'm feeling great." And your
Aussie accent's amazing.
and Marty Taupau, he was sort of, he was straight. He was getting to be in his 30s, and he was just sort of, wasn't having that edge that he used to have. Still playing great, but just maybe wasn't feeling his best. And he tried going carnivore. And he did have a bit of a dip, and they track everything, they have monitors on everything, and they were like, hey, you didn't have a great game, you need to get your shit together. And he said, look, give me one more week, I'm feeling really good, I think this is about to hit. His next week, he has best performance of his career, right? And he's just off since then, So there are actually a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that aren't talking about it because they don't want other people to know. They don't want people to have the secret sauce. This is this is legal steroids, right? I have patients, athletes, professional athletes who've doubled their testosterone by going on a carnivore diet. They're already high ass testosterone because they're high level athletes, right? Now they double their testosterone, and all their other hormones and everything else come up in balance, right? So a lot of these people don't want everyone knowing about it because they don't want people to know that they're doing, because they don't want them to copy them and emulate them and then know their secret and then get their secret. Right. So there's a lot of that. And I know sports medicine doctors who actually specifically work with entire sports team here in Australia, and the entire teams are going carnivore. They're just not talking about it because they don't want other teams to know. So it is getting there. Speaking of which, actually,
you've got a call, hey? Yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah, we really appreciate you coming in. That's always a cool chat. And definitely happy to confirm I'm going to go strict again.
Nice.
Have been.
Yeah, you got me amped to get a steak now.
Since yesterday, the soreness I experienced, there was no other way, I don't think. I did 2 swims and a sauna yesterday. I'm still fucked.
Yeah. It's all those plums, mate.
Yeah. No, I'm off the plums.
Yeah.
I've been sober for a week, I reckon.
Yeah. Nice.
Back on the steak train.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been great to chat again.
Where are you off? You're off overseas?
I'm speaking at a conference in London this week. It's called the PH Public Health Collaboration Study. They do a lot of things in health and sort of shifting our thoughts on how we should approach health, and looking at diet and lifestyle, sort of metabolic health sort of things. Which is great. So having I'll be a part of a debate on benefits of meat and longevity and things like that. But there are a ton of other talks and speakers, and it was sort of in a busy amount of traveling. I'll be on a bunch of different conferences, but that's the next one anyway.
Well, good luck. And thanks again for coming in.
No worries.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
See ya.
Peace. Yeah.